White flight attendant tortures sick black girl. Minutes later, froze. When her CEO father arrives, "I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Please help." The words died in 12-year-old Maya Wellington's throat as her small body crumpled into the narrow aisle between seats 23C and 23D. The fluorescent lights of the airplane cabin blurred into streaks as her vision darkened around the edges, her chest heaving with desperate, shallow gasps that sounded like a broken whistle. Passengers shot up from their seats, their voices colliding into a wall of panic. A woman screamed for help. A man fumbled with his phone, fingers shaking as he tried to dial. But standing directly over Maya's trembling form, arms crossed tight across her chest and lips pressed into a thin line of contempt, flight attendant Sharon Mitchell didn't move an inch. "Please," Maya wheezed, her small hand stretching toward her inhaler that had skittered 3 feet away when she'd collapsed. Her fingernails scraped against the industrial carpet, her brown skin taking on an ashen gray tone that made the nearby passengers gasp in horror. Sharon's heel came down deliberately, the sharp click of her shoe against the plastic inhaler echoing through the cabin like a gunshot. The canister cracked under her weight. "You people always fake emergencies for attention," she said loud enough for half the plane to hear, her voice dripping with a venom that made several passengers recoil. What Sharon didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have imagined as she stood there blocking a dying child from help, was that in exactly 47 minutes, every single moment of cruelty she'd just displayed would cost her absolutely everything, and the man who would make sure of it was closer than she thought. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let me take you back to where this nightmare actually began, because Maya's story isn't just about what happened on that flight. It's about courage in the face of hatred, about dignity under pressure, and about the kind of justice that doesn't just punish cruelty but transforms an entire system. Before we continue, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell us where in the world you're watching from right now. And if you're someone who believes that courage and justice should always win and prejudice should never be tolerated, hit that subscribe button because we bring you these powerful true stories every single week. Now, let's go back to that morning in Atlanta. Maya Wellington stood in the departures terminal at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, her small rolling suitcase decorated with stickers from every state she'd visited. At 12 years old, she was tall for her age, but still unmistakably a child, with neat box braids pulled back into a ponytail and her father's same thoughtful brown eyes. She clutched her crossbody bag tightly. Inside it, her carefully organized travel documents, her emergency inhaler, her backup inhaler, and the medical alert card her father had made her promise to keep accessible. "You sure you're okay doing this alone, baby girl?" Marcus Wellington crouched down to his daughter's eye level, his expensive suit wrinkling at the knees, but he didn't care. His hands rested gently on her shoulders, searching her face for any sign of doubt. Marcus wasn't just any concerned father. He was the CEO of Wellington Global Airlines, one of the fastest-growing carriers in the country, and a man whose business decisions affected thousands of employees and millions of passengers. But right now, none of that mattered. Right now, he was just a dad worried about his little girl flying across the country without him. "Dad, I'm 12, not 2, Maya said with an exaggerated eye roll that made Marcus laugh despite his anxiety. "You taught me what to do. I have my medical alert card. I have my inhalers. I have Aunt Lisa's number programmed in my phone. And it's a direct flight. I'll be in Los Angeles before you know it." The reason for their separate flights was a last-minute emergency board meeting Marcus couldn't avoid. His sister Lisa's 50th birthday celebration in Los Angeles had been planned for months, and Maya had been looking forward to it for weeks. Rather than disappoint her, Marcus had made the difficult decision to let her fly ahead on Skyward Airlines while he handled the crisis and caught a later Wellington Global flight. "You call me the second you land," Marcus said, pulling her into a tight hug. "And if you feel even a little bit off, you tell a flight attendant immediately. Don't try to tough it out." "I promise, Dad," Maya said, her voice muffled against his chest. When she pulled back, there was determination in her eyes that made Marcus's heart swell with pride and ache with worry in equal measure. His daughter had severe asthma, diagnosed when she was 6, and while it was generally well managed with her medication, the stress of flying and changes in cabin pressure could trigger attacks. But Maya had insisted she was ready for this. She'd been working with her doctors, practicing her breathing exercises, proving her responsibility by never forgetting her medication. This was supposed to be a milestone, a moment of growing independence. Marcus wanted to give her that, even though every protective instinct in his body screamed at him to change both their tickets and fly together. "Remember," he said, straightening her collar, "you're a Wellington. That means you're brave, you're kind, and you never let anyone make you feel small, okay?" "Okay, Dad," Maya smiled, and for a moment Marcus saw the confident young woman she was becoming. He walked her to security, watched her go through with her junior traveler badge the airline had provided, and stayed until she disappeared around the corner toward her gate. If he'd known what was about to happen, he would have canceled everything, torn up both tickets, and driven her to Los Angeles himself. But he didn't know. None of them did. Maya found her gate and settled into a seat, pulling out the book she'd brought for the flight. She was reading a novel about a young girl who became a pilot, and she'd underlined her favorite passages about courage and determination. When boarding was called, she lined up with the other passengers, her ticket clutched in her hand, ready for her adventure. That's when she first encountered Sharon Mitchell. Sharon had been a flight attendant for Skyward Airlines for 11 years. She was 42 years old, blonde hair pulled back in the regulation bun, makeup applied with the precision of someone who'd done the same routine for over a decade. To most passengers she looked professional and polished, but there was something hard in her eyes, something bitter that had calcified over years of resentment and prejudice she'd never examined or addressed. When Maya approached the gate, Sharon was checking boarding passes. Her eyes flicked over Maya once, then again, her expression shifting almost imperceptibly. "Traveling alone?" she asked, her tone just a shade cooler than it had been with the passengers before. "Yes, ma'am," Maya said politely, handing over her ticket and junior traveler documentation. Sharon scanned the ticket with more force than necessary, the beep of the machine somehow sounding aggressive. "Seat 23F, all the way in the back." She didn't smile, didn't offer the warm welcome she'd given the White family who'd boarded just before Maya. Maya noticed but said nothing. She was used to these small moments, these microaggressions her father had taught her to recognize but not internalize. She simply thanked Sharon and made her way down the jet bridge, her rolling suitcase bouncing along behind her. The flight was moderately full, about 70% capacity. Maya found her seat by the window in the back section of the economy cabin and carefully stowed her bag in the overhead compartment, keeping her crossbody bag with her medical supplies under the seat in front of her. An older white couple sat in the row ahead of her, and across the aisle a young mother wrestled with a toddler who was already protesting the confinement of his car seat. As more passengers boarded, Maya pulled out her book and tried to focus on the words, but her chest felt tight with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She did her breathing exercises like her doctor had taught her, counting slowly to manage her anxiety. She was fine. Everything was fine. Sharon moved through the cabin doing her pre-flight checks, and when she reached Maya's row, she paused. "You'll need to put that book away for takeoff," she said, her voice clipped. "Yes, ma'am, I will when we're ready," Maya replied, looking up with a polite smile. "I just wanted to read until then." "Now," Sharon said, her eyes narrowing. "Federal regulations require all items to be stowed before departure procedures begin." This wasn't technically true. The actual announcement wouldn't come for another 10 minutes. Maya could see other passengers still reading, still on their phones. But she didn't argue. She simply closed her book and tucked it into the seat pocket, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Sharon moved on without another word, but Maya felt the weight of that interaction settle over her like a cold blanket. Have you ever witnessed someone being treated unfairly because of the color of their skin? It's happening every day, and staying silent makes us part of the problem. If you believe these stories need to be told, hit that subscribe button and make sure you're notified every time we post. Drop a comment below with your thoughts, because your voice matters in these conversations. The plane pushed back from the gate right on schedule. Maya watched through the window as Atlanta grew smaller beneath them, the sprawl of the city giving way to patches of green and brown as they climbed. The ascent was smooth at first, but about 15 minutes into the flight, the cabin pressure began to change, and Maya felt the familiar tightness beginning in her chest. She reached down for her crossbody bag, unzipping it carefully and pulling out her inhaler. 2 puffs, just like her doctor had instructed. She breathed in the medication, held it, and released slowly. The tightness eased slightly. She was okay. This was manageable. But 10 minutes later, the sensation returned, stronger this time. The recycled cabin air felt thin and insufficient. Her breathing became more deliberate, each inhale requiring conscious effort. She pressed the call button above her seat, the gentle chime summoning assistance. Sharon appeared 2 minutes later, her expression already annoyed before she even reached Maya's row. "What is it?" "I'm sorry to bother you," Maya said quietly, her voice already slightly strained, "but I'm having trouble breathing. I have asthma, and the cabin pressure is making it worse. Could I possibly get some water? And maybe move to a seat closer to the bathroom in case I need to step away?" Sharon's jaw tightened. She glanced at the inhaler in Maya's hand, then back at the girl's face, her expression shifting from annoyance to something darker. "There are no available seats, and we're in the middle of a beverage service. You'll have to wait." "I just need water," Maya said, trying to keep her voice steady despite the growing panic in her chest. "Please, I'm not trying to be difficult." "Everyone wants something," Sharon said, her voice loud enough that the passengers in nearby rows turned to look. "You'll get your water when I get to your row. That's how service works. We don't jump the line just because someone decides they need special treatment." The words hung in the air, sharp and ugly. The elderly woman in the row ahead turned around, her face creased with concern. "Miss, the child is clearly struggling. Can't you just get her some water?" Sharon's face flushed red. "Ma'am, I'll thank you not to tell me how to do my job. This is my cabin, and I run it according to airline procedures." Maya shrank back into her seat, humiliation burning through her chest alongside the tightening anxiety. She raised her inhaler again, taking another dose, but her hands were shaking now, and stress was making everything worse. The medication that should have been helping felt like it was barely making a dent in the constriction of her airways. She closed her eyes and tried to focus on her breathing exercises. In for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 4. But the air wouldn't come properly. Each breath felt like trying to suck oxygen through a coffee stirrer. 20 minutes passed. Sharon completed her beverage service for the first half of the plane, deliberately slow, chatting with some passengers about their travel plans, while Maya sat in the back, her breathing becoming more labored with each passing minute. The young mother across the aisle noticed and leaned over. "Honey, are you okay?" Maya tried to nod, but her vision was starting to blur at the edges. The familiar signs of a serious attack were manifesting faster than usual. Her lips were beginning to feel numb. Her chest felt like someone had wrapped iron bands around it and was tightening them with each passing second. She reached for her call button again, but her hand was shaking so badly she could barely press it. The chime sounded. 1 minute passed. 2, 3. Sharon finally appeared, her beverage cart now behind her. "What now?" she said, exasperation dripping from every syllable. "I can't breathe," Maya managed, each word an effort. "Please, I need help." Sharon stared at her for a long moment, and in that stare Maya saw something that made her blood run cold, even through her oxygen-deprived haze. She saw contempt. She saw disbelief. She saw judgment that had nothing to do with her medical condition and everything to do with the color of her skin. "You were just fine a minute ago," Sharon said. "I've been a flight attendant for 11 years, and I can spot a faker from a mile away. You people always pull this kind of stunt when you don't get your way fast enough. You people." The words echoed through the cabin. Several passengers audibly gasped. A man 3 rows up pulled out his phone and started recording. The elderly woman who'd spoken up before stood up from her seat. "This is absolutely unacceptable. This child is in medical distress. I'm a retired nurse, and I can see from here that her lips are turning blue." "Sit down, ma'am, or I'll have to report you for interfering with crew duties," Sharon snapped. "And you," she pointed at the man recording, "put that phone away or you'll be banned from this airline." The man didn't put his phone away. Neither did the 4 other passengers who'd now started recording. In the age of viral videos and social media accountability, they understood they were witnessing something that needed to be documented. Maya tried to stand up, thinking maybe if she could get to the bathroom she could splash water on her face. Maybe the movement would help. But the moment she got to her feet, her legs buckled. The cabin tilted sickeningly, and she grabbed for the seat back to steady herself. Her inhaler slipped from her grip, clattering to the floor and rolling into the aisle. Maya dropped to her knees, her hand reaching for it, her vision tunneling to just that small blue canister that held her ability to breathe. Her fingers stretched so close, just inches away. Sharon's heel came down on top of it. The crack of the plastic breaking wasn't loud, but in that moment it was the only sound Maya could hear. She looked up from her position on the floor, her eyes meeting Sharon's, and saw not accident, not even indifference, but deliberate cruelty. "Oops," Sharon said, her tone flat and emotionless. Maya's world was shrinking to a small point of light. Her chest was on fire. Her brain was screaming for oxygen. But even in that moment, even as her body was failing her, she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. Maya Wellington, 12 years old and terrified, maintained the dignity her father had instilled in her, even as everything inside her wanted to panic. That dignity, that quiet courage in the face of hatred, would haunt Sharon Mitchell for the rest of her life. What would you do if you witnessed this happening? Would you speak up? Would you record it? Would you demand action? Tell us in the comments below, because silence in the face of injustice makes us complicit. And if you want to see how this story ends, you need to keep watching, because what happens next will restore your faith that justice still exists. The cabin erupted into chaos. "Someone help her!" the young mother screamed, unbuckling her seatbelt and rushing across the aisle. She dropped to her knees next to Maya, whose lips were now distinctly blue, her breathing reduced to horrible wheezing gasps that sounded like a child drowning on dry land. "I'm a doctor." A man from first class came running down the aisle, his expensive suit jacket flapping behind him. Dr. James Chen, a pulmonologist from Chicago, had been trying to sleep with noise-canceling headphones when the commotion finally penetrated his awareness. Now, seeing the collapsed child and the flight attendant standing over her with crossed arms, his face went pale with professional horror. He pushed past Sharon without ceremony and knelt beside Maya. "Severe asthma attack," he said immediately, his fingers finding her pulse. "Her oxygen saturation is dangerously low. We need emergency oxygen now. And someone needs to tell the captain we have a medical emergency." Sharon didn't move. "Sir, I need you to return to your seat. Interfering with crew duties is a federal—" "I don't give a damn about your federal regulations," Dr. Chen roared, his usual bedside manner completely abandoned. "This child is going into respiratory failure. Get me oxygen, get me any bronchodilators in your medical kit, and get the captain on the radio now. Or I swear to God I will have your license and this airline's operating certificate." The elderly retired nurse pushed past Sharon as well, joining Dr. Chen on the floor. "I've called the captain," another passenger shouted from a few rows up, her phone pressed to her ear. "They're making an emergency landing in Dallas." "That's 20 minutes away," Dr. Chen said, his voice tight. "I'm not sure she has 20 minutes. He looked at Maya's face, her eyes starting to flutter closed, her body going limp. "Stay with me, sweetheart. Stay with me. What's your name?" "Maya," she whispered, the word barely audible. "Okay, Maya, you're going to be fine. I need you to try to stay awake for me, okay? Can you do that?" Maya's head moved in the smallest nod, but her eyes were closing. "Oxygen!" Dr. Chen shouted at Sharon. "Where is your emergency oxygen?" Sharon finally moved, but her pace was deliberately slow, her movements lacking any urgency. She walked, not ran, to the front of the cabin. She opened one overhead compartment, then another, seemingly unable to remember where the emergency equipment was stored. Passengers were shouting at her, some crying, all of them recording on their phones as this nightmare unfolded in real time. "I can't seem to find it," Sharon called back, her voice carrying none of the panic the situation warranted. "The red compartment above row 5. Another flight attendant, a young black woman named Keisha, came running from the back galley. She'd been on her break and had only just realized what was happening. Her face was horrified as she took in the scene. The collapsed child, the doctor performing emergency care, and Sharon standing uselessly by the overhead bins. Keisha shoved past Sharon, yanked open the correct compartment, and ran the portable oxygen tank back to Dr. Chen. "I'm so sorry," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry. This should never have happened." Dr. Chen got the oxygen mask over Maya's face, and after 30 seconds that felt like 30 years, her color began to very slowly improve. The horrible wheezing eased slightly. She wasn't out of danger, not even close, but she was breathing better than she had been. "I need my emergency inhaler," Dr. Chen said to anyone who would listen. "My bag is in overhead bin in row 2A. Someone get it." A passenger sprinted to first class and returned with Dr. Chen's bag. He pulled out his own prescription inhaler, technically against protocols to share medication, but also, technically, the only thing keeping this child alive until they could land. He administered it through a specialized spacer he happened to have, and Maya's breathing improved another crucial degree. Through all of this, Sharon stood against the wall of the cabin, her arms crossed, watching with an expression that managed to convey both annoyance and complete lack of concern. "You should be ashamed of yourself," the elderly nurse said, looking up at Sharon with disgust that transcended words. "In 40 years of nursing, I have never seen such deliberate cruelty to a child. Never." "I was following protocols," Sharon said defensively. She didn't seem that serious. They always exaggerate. "They?" Dr. Chen looked up sharply, and in that moment he understood exactly what had happened here. His jaw clenched so hard the muscle jumped in his cheek. "You mean black children? Is that what you mean by they?" Sharon's face flushed, but she didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her silence said everything. The captain's voice came over the intercom, professional but with an edge of barely controlled anger. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are making an emergency landing at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. Medical personnel will board the aircraft immediately upon landing. Please remain seated and remain calm. Flight attendants, prepare the cabin for emergency landing procedures." The plane banked hard, the pilot pushing the aircraft to its maximum safe speed. Passengers gripped their armrests, but nobody complained. They were all focused on the small girl on the floor, her chest rising and falling under the oxygen mask, her hand being held by a doctor she'd met 3 minutes ago who was quite possibly saving her life. Keisha, the other flight attendant, was on the cabin phone speaking rapidly to the captain, explaining exactly what had happened, her voice shaking with a mixture of fury and professional obligation to report accurately. When she hung up, she looked at Sharon with an expression of such profound disappointment that several passengers later reported it was the look that finally made Sharon understand she'd done something unforgivable. But Sharon's response wasn't remorse. It was defensiveness bordering on defiance. "You all act like I committed some crime," she said to the cabin at large, her voice rising. "She's fine now, isn't she? This is exactly what I'm talking about. These people always exaggerate everything. And then everyone acts like I'm the villain. I've seen it 100 times. They always want to sue, they always want special treatment, they always—" "Shut up!" The roar came from a businessman in row 12, a white man in his 50s who looked like he'd never raised his voice in public in his life. "Just shut your damn mouth. We all saw what you did. We all recorded it. You stood there and watched a child suffocate. You stepped on her inhaler deliberately. We saw you, so just stop talking, because every word out of your mouth is making it worse." Sharon's face went from red to white. For the first time, looking around at the sea of phones recording her, at the expressions of disgust and horror on every face in the cabin, she seemed to understand that something had shifted, that something had gone terribly wrong for her. Not just for the child on the floor, but she still didn't apologize, not to Maya, not to the passengers, not to anyone. The plane touched down in Dallas with a hard thump 15 minutes later. The moment the wheels hit the tarmac, emergency vehicles were already racing alongside the aircraft, their lights painting the cabin in alternating flashes of red and blue. The plane taxied directly to a special gate where paramedics were waiting. The cabin door opened, and 6 paramedics rushed in with a stretcher and full emergency equipment. Dr. Chen gave them a rapid handoff, speaking in medical shorthand about oxygen saturation levels, medication administered, timeline of the attack. They worked with swift efficiency, getting Maya stabilized and onto the stretcher. "I'm going with her," Dr. Chen said, and nobody argued. He'd held this child's hand through the worst 15 minutes of her life, and he wasn't going to let her wake up in a hospital surrounded by strangers if he could help it. As they wheeled Maya toward the door, she turned her head slightly, looking back at the cabin full of passengers who'd tried to help her. "Thank you," she whispered through her oxygen mask, and several passengers openly started crying. Keisha stood by the door, her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, baby," she said as Maya passed. "I'm so sorry." Sharon stood in the galley, backed against the wall, watching the paramedics take Maya away. And there, with no more audience to perform for, something finally cracked in her armor. Her hands were shaking. Her face had gone a sickly gray color. The reality of what she'd done, what she'd almost caused, was starting to penetrate the layers of prejudice and defensiveness she'd built around herself. But it was too late. So far too late. The paramedics took Maya to Dallas Methodist Hospital, Dr. Chen riding in the ambulance with her, still holding her hand, still talking to her in a gentle voice, keeping her calm and awake. Back on the plane, the passengers were told there would be a 2-hour delay while the airline arranged for a new crew. Nobody complained. Several passengers were crying. Others were already uploading their videos to social media with captions like, "Flight attendant deliberately hurt sick child," and "Racism almost killed this little girl," and "Skyward Airlines needs to be held accountable." Sharon was escorted off the plane by 2 airline supervisors and 2 airport security officers. As she walked down the jetway, she heard someone behind her say, "I hope they throw the book at you." She turned to look back at the plane, at all those passengers watching her leave, with expressions ranging from anger to disgust to pity. And in that moment, Sharon Mitchell still didn't fully understand that her entire life had just changed. She thought this would blow over. She thought the airline would protect her. She thought, somehow, that the story she'd told herself for years about those people would shield her from consequences. She had no idea that one of those passengers had already made a call. She had no idea that Marcus Wellington, CEO of a competing airline and father of the child she'd nearly killed, had just landed in Dallas on his own company's flight and was at that very moment getting into a taxi headed for the same hospital where his daughter was fighting to breathe. And she definitely had no idea that Marcus Wellington wasn't just a CEO. He was a man who'd built an empire on treating every passenger with dignity, who'd started his career as a baggage handler and worked his way up, who'd experienced his own share of discrimination in the industry and had vowed that if he ever had the power to change things, he would. Sharon walked through the airport terminal, flanked by security, and actually felt a moment of relief. She was off that plane. The situation was over. Tomorrow, she'd probably get a slap on the wrist, maybe a stern talking to from management. She'd been disciplined before for customer complaints, and nothing had ever come of it. Why should this be different? That thought would haunt her in the months to come. That moment of dismissive relief would be the last comfortable feeling Sharon Mitchell would have for a very long time. Stay with me, because what happens next is the kind of justice that doesn't just punish one person, but changes an entire system. If you believe in accountability, in consequences, in making sure people like Sharon can never hurt another child, then you need to hit that subscribe button right now and drop a comment telling us, do you think she deserves what's coming? Let's talk about it. Marcus Wellington's hands were shaking as he swiped his credit card for the taxi. They were still shaking as the car pulled away from the airport, weaving through Dallas traffic toward Methodist Hospital. They'd been shaking since the moment his phone had rung 23 minutes ago, since the moment a panicked airline representative had said the words "emergency landing" and "Maya" in the same sentence. The taxi driver tried to make small talk, but Marcus couldn't hear him over the roar of blood in his ears. His baby girl, his brave, sweet, determined Maya, who'd been so excited to prove she could handle this trip alone. He'd sent her on that plane. He'd let her go. And now she was in a hospital and he wasn't there, and every second of this drive felt like drowning. His phone buzzed with a text from his sister, Lisa. "I'm 15 minutes from the hospital. She's going to be okay. The doctors say she's stable. Marcus, she's okay." Stable. The word should have been comforting, but Marcus knew stable didn't mean fine. Stable didn't mean untraumatized. Stable didn't mean his daughter hadn't experienced something that would mark her for the rest of her life. Another text came through, this one from his head of security. "Sir, video is already going viral. We have at least 15 different angles. It's bad, really bad." Marcus opened the link his security chief had sent, and for the next 2 minutes and 47 seconds, he watched his daughter suffer. He watched her collapse. He watched her hand reach for her inhaler. He watched a flight attendant step on it deliberately. He heard the words, "You people," said about his child while she gasped for air. When the video ended, Marcus's hands had stopped shaking. His jaw was set, his eyes were cold, and the taxi driver would later tell his wife that he'd never seen a man's face change so completely from fear to calculation in his entire life. Marcus made the first call to his legal team. "I need everything you can pull on Skyward Airlines discrimination complaints, specifically any involving black passengers or passengers with disabilities. I need it within the hour. Bill every resource we have to this. I don't care what it costs." The second call went to his PR director. "The video is going viral. I want our statement ready, but we're not releasing it yet. We're going to be strategic about this. We're going to be surgical." The third call was the most important. Marcus scrolled through his contacts, found Jonathan Chen, CEO of Skyward Airlines, and hit dial. "Marcus." Jonathan's voice was already defensive, the tone of a man who'd been briefed on an incoming disaster. "Look, I know you've heard about the incident involving your daughter. We're conducting a full internal investigation, and I want you to know that employee has been suspended pending—" "Shut up, Jonathan." Marcus's voice was quiet, almost conversational, which made it infinitely more frightening. "Just shut up and listen to me very carefully. I have 17 videos from 17 different passengers. I have a statement from a pulmonologist who says your flight attendant's negligence nearly killed my daughter. I have audio of her making racist statements that are crystal clear. And I have resources you can't even imagine that I'm about to bring down on your airline like the hammer of God. Marcus, you need to understand, we have protocols for these situations. Your protocols almost murdered my 12-year-old daughter." Each word was precise, controlled. "Your employee deliberately stepped on her inhaler while she begged for help. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to fire that flight attendant right now, not suspend. Fire. You're going to cooperate fully with the FAA investigation I'm launching within the hour. You're going to implement comprehensive anti-discrimination training across your entire staff. And you're going to pray that when this is done, you still have an airline left. You can't threaten me with, I'm not threatening you, I'm telling you what's going to happen, because unlike you, Jonathan, I have something you don't. I have righteousness on my side. My daughter didn't do anything wrong. She was sick, she was scared, she was alone, and your employee tortured her. So you can either get ahead of this and show some actual leadership, or I will personally make sure that Skyward Airlines becomes a cautionary tale about what happens when you let racism and cruelty infect your corporate culture." Marcus hung up without waiting for a response. The taxi pulled up to the hospital emergency entrance. Marcus was out of the car before it fully stopped, throwing cash at the driver without counting it, running through the automatic doors into the harsh fluorescent lighting of the ER. His sister Lisa was there, her face tear-stained, but she managed a smile when she saw him. "She's okay," Lisa said immediately, grabbing Marcus's hands. "She's breathing fine now. They've got her stabilized. She's been asking for you." "Where?" Marcus managed, and Lisa led him through a maze of corridors to a room where his daughter lay in a hospital bed, oxygen cannula in her nose, IV in her arm, looking impossibly small and fragile and brave. "Daddy," Maya said when she saw him, and Marcus's legs nearly gave out. He made it to her bedside and gathered her into his arms as carefully as he could with all the medical equipment attached to her. "I'm here, baby girl. I'm here. I'm so sorry. I'm so, so sorry." He was crying now, not even trying to hide it, his tears falling into her braids. "It's not your fault," Maya said, her voice still raspy from the breathing tube they'd used initially when she'd arrived. "I thought I could handle it. But then she was so mean, Daddy. She was so mean, and I couldn't breathe, and I was scared, and—" "Shh. It's okay. You're safe now." "You're safe." Marcus pulled back enough to look at her face, checking her color, her eyes, her breathing. She looked exhausted and shaken, but she was alive. His daughter was alive. "Maya, baby, I need you to tell me exactly what happened. Can you do that? Take your time." And Maya did. With the clarity and detail that would make her testimony devastating in the depositions to come, Maya walked her father through every moment of that nightmare flight. She told him about the coldness from the beginning, the escalating cruelty, the refusal to help, and the final deliberate destruction of her inhaler while she was on the floor begging for help. Marcus listened, his face growing harder with each sentence, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. But he didn't interrupt. He let his daughter tell her story, witnessing her courage in reliving this trauma for him, documenting the injustice in a way that would soon matter very much. When Maya finished, Marcus kissed her forehead and said, "I'm so proud of you. You were so brave. You stayed calm. You tried to follow all the rules. You did everything right. This wasn't your fault. None of this was your fault. Do you understand me?" Maya nodded, but there was something in her eyes that broke Marcus's heart. It was the look of lost innocence, of a child who'd learned too early that the world could be cruel for no reason other than the color of her skin. "Dad?" Maya said quietly. "Why did she hate me?" "I didn't do anything to her." And that question, that heartbreaking question from his baby girl, sealed Sharon Mitchell's fate more thoroughly than any video or testimony ever could. "Some people are poisoned by hate," Marcus said gently, "and sometimes that poison leaks out and hurts innocent people. But here's what's going to happen, Maya. What happened to you is never going to happen to another child on an airplane. Ever. I'm going to make sure of it. Do you trust me?" "I trust you, Daddy." "Then rest. Let the medicine work, and let me handle this." Over the next 3 hours while Maya slept, Marcus Wellington orchestrated a response that would become a case study in corporate accountability and social justice. He worked from the hospital cafeteria, his laptop open, his phone on constant rotation between calls, his legal team and PR team joining him remotely via video conference. First, he contacted every single passenger from that flight. Using Skyward's passenger manifest that his team had acquired through their connections, Marcus or a member of his team personally called 47 people. He introduced himself, thanked them for helping his daughter, and asked them if they'd be willing to provide statements and video footage for a formal FAA complaint. All 47 said yes. Several cried on the phone. One man, the businessman who'd shouted at Sharon, said, "Mr. Wellington, I have 3 daughters. What happened to Maya could have been any of them. I will do whatever it takes to make sure that woman never wears a uniform again." Second, Marcus compiled every piece of evidence. The videos were devastating. From multiple angles, they showed Sharon's deliberate cruelty, her refusal to help, her racist language, and the moment she stepped on Maya's inhaler. No jury in the world would find this ambiguous. But Marcus wasn't just thinking about criminal charges or civil suits, though those would come. He was thinking bigger. Third, he reached out to his contacts in the media, not the tabloids or the clickbait sites, but serious journalists at CNN, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and 60 Minutes. He provided them with exclusive access to the full story, complete with video evidence, passenger testimonies, and Dr. Chen's medical documentation of how close Maya had come to dying. The stories started running within hours. By midnight, Flight Attendant tortures sick black girl was trending on Twitter with over 2 million tweets. By morning, it would be the lead story on every major news network. Fourth, and most importantly, Marcus drafted a formal complaint to the FAA, detailing not just this incident, but requesting a full investigation into Skyward Airlines' training protocols, discrimination complaint history, and employee oversight. His legal team had already dug up 7 other complaints against Sharon Mitchell specifically, all involving black passengers, all dismissed by Skyward management as misunderstandings. Finally, at 2:47 a.m., exhausted but wired on coffee and righteous fury, Marcus wrote one more email. This one went to his entire executive team at Wellington Global Airlines. Tonight, my daughter nearly died because a flight attendant valued her prejudices more than a child's life. Tomorrow, we begin developing the most comprehensive anti-discrimination and medical emergency training program in the industry. We're going to share it freely with any airline that wants it. We're going to set a new standard. We're going to prove that treating every passenger with dignity isn't just good morality, it's good business. And we're going to name the program after Maya, because she survived something no child should ever experience, and her courage is going to change this entire industry. Marcus hit send, closed his laptop, and went back to his daughter's room. Lisa had fallen asleep in the chair, and Maya was sleeping peacefully now, her breathing steady and clear. Marcus sat down on the edge of the bed, careful not to disturb her, and allowed himself to finally feel the full weight of how close he'd come to losing her. Tomorrow, the war would begin in earnest. Tomorrow, Sharon Mitchell and Skyward Airlines would face consequences that would reshape their lives and their company. Tomorrow, justice would start its work, but tonight, Marcus just sat with his daughter, listening to her breathe, grateful beyond words that he still could. Still with me? Good, because we're about to watch a masterclass in accountability. This isn't just about one person getting fired. This is about systematic change. Hit that subscribe button if you believe justice should transform systems, not just punish individuals. And comment below, what would true justice look like to you in this situation? The video had 40 million views by the time the sun rose over Dallas. Sharon Mitchell woke up in a hotel room provided by Skyward Airlines, checked her phone out of habit, and felt the floor drop out from under her life. She was a meme, her face frozen in that moment of contempt as she stood over Maya, was being shared across every social media platform in existence. The hashtag Justice for Maya was trending worldwide. Her full name, her age, her work history, her address, everything had been uncovered by the relentless machinery of internet outrage. Her phone had 347 missed calls. Her email inbox had over 8,000 new messages, most of them unprintable. Someone had found her Facebook page and Instagram account before she could make them private, and the comments were brutal, graphic, and in many cases threatening enough that she would later need to involve police. Sharon sat on the edge of the hotel bed, staring at her phone, and for the first time really understood. Her life as she knew it was over. The knock on her door came at 9:15 a.m. Two executives from Skyward Airlines, both looking like they'd aged 10 years overnight, stood in the hallway with human resources documentation and faces that held no sympathy whatsoever. Sharon Mitchell, effective immediately. Your employment with Skyward Airlines is terminated for gross misconduct, violation of company policies, and behavior unbecoming of an airline employee, the senior executive read from a prepared statement. You are required to surrender your uniform, your employee identification, and any company property. You will receive your final paycheck minus the costs of the emergency landing, which, per your employment contract, you are liable for. We estimate that cost at approximately $127,000. Sharon's face went white. You can't be serious. I didn't force the plane to land. The captain made that decision. The captain made that decision because you refused to provide emergency medical care to a dying child, the executive interrupted coldly. The FAA is investigating, and they will determine if criminal charges are warranted. We've been advised by our legal team to have no further contact with you. You'll be receiving formal notice of several civil lawsuits filed by passengers from the flight. I suggest you get an attorney. They left her with a box of her personal items from her locker and a formal termination letter. Sharon sat back down on the bed, the reality crashing over her in waves. No job, lawsuits, criminal investigation, $127,000 in debt. But that was just the beginning. By the end of the week, Sharon's life had been systematically dismantled by a combination of legal consequences, social consequences, and the particularly devastating involvement of Marcus Wellington's resources. The FAA investigation moved with unusual speed, accelerated by political pressure and public outrage. They didn't just investigate Sharon, they investigated Skyward's entire training protocol and discovered a pattern of ignored discrimination complaints. The airline was fined $4.5 million and required to implement comprehensive reforms. Skyward's stock dropped 23% in a week, wiping out $2.1 billion in market value. 3 executives resigned. The board demanded Jonathan Chen's resignation, which he provided. But Marcus wasn't satisfied with just the airline's punishment. He wanted to ensure Sharon specifically could never do this to another child. Marcus's legal team filed a civil suit not just for damages, but specifically requesting the revocation of Sharon's flight attendant certification. They compiled her entire complaint history, testimony from dozens of passengers who'd experienced her microaggressions over the years, and expert testimony about the medical danger she'd created. The Federal Aviation Administration, under intense public pressure and with overwhelming evidence, did something they'd only done 12 times in the previous decade. They permanently revoked Sharon Mitchell's flight attendant certification. She would never work in aviation again, not just at Skyward, but anywhere in the industry, in any capacity. The civil lawsuit filed by Marcus on Maya's behalf sought $15 million in damages. But he also encouraged every single passenger from that flight to file their own suits for emotional distress. 17 passengers did, ranging from requests for $50,000 to $500,000 each. Sharon's homeowner's insurance and personal liability didn't come close to covering it. Within 3 months, Sharon Mitchell had declared bankruptcy. Her house went into foreclosure. Her car was repossessed. She moved in with her elderly mother in a small apartment in a suburb of Memphis. But perhaps the most devastating consequence was the one Marcus engineered specifically to ensure Sharon's actions would follow her forever. Marcus established a foundation called Maya's Sky Initiative with a $50 million endowment from his personal fortune. The Foundation's mission was threefold. First, to provide free training to every airline in America on recognizing and managing medical emergencies, with specific emphasis on asthma, allergies, and other conditions common in children. Second, to create a national database of flight crew discrimination complaints that airlines could access during hiring, ensuring that people with Sharon's history couldn't just move to another carrier and continue their behavior. Third, to offer travel grants and medical support for children with chronic conditions, ensuring that kids like Maya would never have to choose between their health and their independence. The Foundation launched with a press conference that aired on every major network. Maya stood next to her father, still looking small and young, but with a steel in her eyes that the cameras captured and the world responded to. "What happened to me was wrong," Maya said into the microphones, her voice clear and strong. "But if my scary experience means no other kid has to go through this, then something good came from something bad. That's what justice really means, not just punishing people who do wrong, but changing the system so the wrong can't happen again." The clip went viral, racking up another 25 million views. Maya became the face of both trauma and resilience, a symbol of dignified courage that reminded the country why they'd been so outraged in the first place. Dr. James Chen, the pulmonologist who'd saved Maya's life, became the medical director of the Maya's Sky initiative, working with airlines to develop protocols that would become industry standard within 2 years. Keisha, the flight attendant who'd tried to help, was promoted within Skyward and became one of their key trainers for the new anti-discrimination program they were forced to implement. She personally oversaw the termination of 3 other flight attendants whose complaint histories revealed them as liabilities, and Sharon Mitchell watched all of this unfold from her mother's apartment, where she lived in a small bedroom that used to be a home office, working minimum-wage jobs that would hire her once they Googled her name and saw the thousands of articles. She got a job at a call center, fired after 2 weeks when customers recognized her voice from the viral videos and complained. She got a job at a grocery store. Lasted 3 days before someone took her picture, posted it online, and the store received so many threats of boycott that they let her go. She tried to move to another state, change her name, start over. But in the age of internet, there's no such thing as starting over. Her face was too well known, her actions too well documented. The videos never went away. They would never go away. 6 months after the incident, Sharon sat in her mother's apartment watching the news coverage of Maya's Sky initiative opening its 10th training center. Maya was there, cutting a ribbon, smiling and healthy and brave. Marcus stood behind her, one hand on her shoulder, pride radiating from every inch of his posture. "The program has already trained over 15,000 flight attendants," the news anchor reported. Airlines that implement the Maya's Sky protocols are seeing dramatic increases in positive passenger feedback and dramatic decreases in discrimination complaints. What started as a tragedy has become a transformation of an entire industry. Sharon turned off the TV. She sat in the darkness of the small room, surrounded by the ruins of her life, and finally, far too late, felt the weight of genuine remorse. But remorse without the opportunity for redemption is just another form of suffering. And suffering, Marcus Wellington had decided, was the only language people like Sharon truly understood. This is what accountability looks like when someone has the resources and the determination to pursue it. Not just firing one person, but changing an entire system. Not just punishment, but prevention. Comment below. Is this justice? Too much? Not enough? Let us know where you're watching from and what you think true accountability should look like. 3 years later, Maya Wellington stood on a stage at a conference for airline industry professionals. She was 15 now, taller, more poised, but with the same thoughtful eyes and quiet strength that had carried her through that terrible day. "The worst moment of my life changed everything," she told an audience of 3,000 airline executives, flight attendants, and industry workers. "But it didn't just change my life. It changed how you all do your jobs. It changed how you see passengers, especially passengers who look like me, especially passengers with disabilities or medical conditions." Maya clicked to the next slide in her presentation, showing statistics. Discrimination complaints down 67% industry-wide. Medical emergency response times improved by 83%. Customer satisfaction scores up across every major airline. "These numbers represent real people," Maya continued. "Kids like I was, who are scared and sick, and just need someone to help them with kindness. The Maya's Sky Initiative has trained over 200,000 flight crew members. That's 200,000 people who now know how to recognize the signs of an asthma attack, who know that ignoring a sick child isn't just cruel, it's potentially criminal, who know that the color of someone's skin should never determine the quality of care they receive." The audience rose in a standing ovation that lasted 3 minutes. Marcus, sitting in the front row, had tears streaming down his face, not of sadness, but of overwhelming pride. Maya had taken her trauma and transformed it into purpose. She'd become a spokesperson not just for her foundation, but for a generation of kids who'd experienced discrimination and refused to let it define them. As for Sharon Mitchell, she'd moved again, this time to a small town in rural Montana, where nobody knew her story. She worked at a diner, lived in a trailer, and had slowly, painfully, begun the work of examining the prejudices that had destroyed her life. She would never work in aviation again. She would never fully rebuild what she'd lost. But in the quiet moments when she watched the news and saw Maya Wellington speaking with confidence and grace, Sharon felt something she'd never expected to feel: gratitude. Gratitude that Maya had survived, gratitude that her own actions, as horrific as they were, had led to changes that protected thousands of other children. Gratitude that justice, while devastating to her personally, had served a purpose larger than punishment. Sharon would never contact Maya, never seek forgiveness, never try to insert herself into the narrative of redemption. She understood, finally, that some actions are too severe to be forgiven, that some consequences are permanent, and that living with the weight of what you've done is itself a form of accountability. Marcus Wellington never stopped being vigilant. He knew that changing a system was an ongoing process, not a one-time fix. The Maya's Sky Initiative expanded into schools, hospitals, and public spaces, training people everywhere how to recognize and respond to medical emergencies without bias. And Maya? She learned to fly again, not as a passenger but as a pilot. On her 16th birthday, Marcus took her to a private airfield where he'd arranged for her first flying lesson. Maya sat in the cockpit of a small Cessna, her hands on the controls, and for the first time since that terrible day, she felt the joy of flight without the shadow of fear. "You ready?" her instructor asked. Maya looked out at the clear blue sky stretching endlessly before her. She thought about the girl she'd been, collapsed on the floor of an airplane, fighting for each breath. She thought about the courage it had taken to survive not just the attack, but the aftermath, the publicity, the trauma. She thought about all the children who would fly safely because of what she'd endured. "I'm ready," Maya said, and pushed the throttle forward. The plane lifted off the ground, and Maya Wellington soared into the sky she'd once feared, reclaiming it as her own. That's the thing about courage. It's not the absence of fear. It's moving forward despite it. It's taking your worst moment and refusing to let it be your defining moment. It's understanding that justice isn't just about punishing those who hurt you, but about protecting those who come after. Sharon Mitchell destroyed her own life through hatred and cruelty, but Maya Wellington built something beautiful from the ashes of that destruction. And if you ask which one of them really won in the end, the answer is clear. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you why courage and justice matter, then hit that subscribe button right now. We share stories like this every week, stories that challenge us, inspire us, and remind us that ordinary people can change the world when they refuse to accept injustice. Drop a comment telling us what this story meant to you and where you're watching from. Because your voice matters, and these conversations matter, and making sure no child ever experiences what Maya experienced matters. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.